So John and I have just watched the Pathless Paths video about consciousness, and we wanted to respond. And I think we both really resonated with most of what he was saying.
Yeah.
And maybe to kind of recap, it was basically that there's these two perspectives or two dimensions.
I would go further. I'd say there's a third, but right now we're going to talk about
Right. This is we'll get to another possibility of how we could relate to these two perspectives. There's definitely sort of a deeper way of perceiving a certain perspective that allows these two to be sort of observed from the outside.
Yeah.
So instead of being a reductionist or a Mysterian, which were these two perspectives on how to answer this question about what place consciousness has in nature, we could actually take a step out of those perspectives and gain a view of them both from a new position of subjectivity.
Yeah.
So we almost objectify these positions, and in so doing, gain something.
Yeah, I think it's Bob
new.
Keegan that says the key to transcendence is when the subject of one stage becomes the object of the subject of the next stage.
Exactly.
And something about that just rings true with me, and because you are able to see, oh, there's another dimension there. But you never can actually catch up real time
with where you are,
because you miss it when you try to do it.
Right.
In other words, you can't.
Or if you did catch up, you just objectified something new.
That's right.
But you still you kept going. You kept evolving.
So it is like an ad infinitum of going back and looking at these new perspectives.
So people get angry when certain philosophers will end their philosophy in a paradox or some kind of infinite regress.
Oh, yeah.
But if the nature of reality is such that it constantly regresses infinitely beyond its arrival in every moment,
yep,
then that's the perfect. I mean, what better philosophy is there than
I think that
an open-ended philosophy that keeps changing?
And I think that's the backbone to an integral philosophy. And
right.
We're talking about infinity and paradoxes. Well, you do have to be comfortable with paradoxes if you're going to have this integrated, more holistic, more inclusive approach.
And I think it's an empirical step to take. Like, if you look at the physical world, what does it do? It keeps changing and evolving.
That's right.
The biological world keeps changing and evolving. The psychological world keeps changing and evolving as we age, as civilization develops.
Yeah, and I don't think that's usually highlighted enough. And
we haven't really, as a people, understood evolution. Like, we haven't taken it into our culture and changed the way we approach life based on this truth of evolution. We'll apply it to everything else except our own minds.
Yeah. And just coming back to how that hasn't been highlighted as much in terms of the psychological evolution, the software evolution, basically the humanities, dealing in that department, and you wonder why there's like a kind of a snootiness at universities, as in the humanities. Oh, okay, that doesn't.
Right.
You know, that's like
science,
la stuff.
It's not facts.
Fluffy stuff. Yeah, and. I don't know. Is that changing right now? Do you see it changing? Do you see more acceptance? Do you see one maybe going to the other direction, where sometimes the more interior
will develop. But I think that the university is a microcosm of the society, and within the university, this intense, fierce battle between the humanities departments and the sciences is a reflection of what's going on in society between religion and materialism or atheism. And so
I see it on YouTube, I think.
It's everywhere.
It's not going away.
That same dichotomous battle, like the one between reductionists and Mysterians, is going on everywhere, both in the intellectual culture within the university and in the popular culture and then media.
You come across the reductionists, which seems kind of like I'll say a middle point for some reason, because you have they're criticizing mythic believers who they would kind of lump into this Mysterian category to a degree, and then the more humanistic and transpersonal, the more holistic ways of spirituality, they lump them all together and
they reduce it all to a single explainable.
Well, they're all crazy, and I mean,
once you do that as a human being and you've totally cut yourself off from an other, and you've defined an in-group, and then by necessity also define an out-group. Yeah. You fundamentally miss the point.
Yeah, you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
There's something there that
whoops. Yeah, you've projected a shadow, basically.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, I mean, The Pathless Path brought up evolutionary psychology.
Yeah.
And that is at least the beginnings of an attempt to bring the mind into this evolutionary picture that we can understand in the biological and the physical world.
Yeah, and I think it's actually the unfolding of the extension to find a bridge between these seemingly polar opposite views. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. Well, wait a minute. Let's build a bridge now. Oh, this is how I get over there. Talk about evolution. We know evolution here on the more reductionist side of the street.
Right.
The theory's in. The party's over on that.
So I think here's the question: evolutionary psychology, as it exists now, I think of someone like Steven Pinker.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to reduce the mind or psychology or the psyche to the brain and the body and our evolutionary history. But his understanding of evolution is a mechanical understanding of it. It's driven only by individuals desiring something and the natural selection that happens as a result.
It seems kind of interesting that he would come to the position he did. If what you're talking about is true, as in having that reductionist view of evolution, all of a sudden, well, now he jumps planes, third person to first person.
Exactly. The psyche is necessarily something you experience. Steven Pinker has a psyche. He is a psyche.
Yeah.
And he's trying to offer an explanation for how the psyche became the psyche.
Yeah.
So it's autobiographical in a way. All of his scientific work.
And we're going to come back to that loop that of objectifying you, never being able to catch up because once you've done it, you messed up again.
Right. So maybe to get back to the question of consciousness itself and how are we supposed to understand it as a natural phenomenon or as a religious phenomenon, supernatural phenomenon.
Yeah.
Because it's the boundary between these two worlds. I mean, the reason the reductionist would want to say that consciousness doesn't really exist is because if he says it does exist, then religion becomes a legitimate human expression.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think, because of the confusion that some people kind of bring some baggage on with religion. Well, religion got a bad name. It's not necessarily religion's fault for how some people...
It's the dogmatic way of thinking.
Yeah.
Which happens on both sides.
That's right. So it's something trans-religion. It's not religion anymore.
And trans-science.
Trans-science. It's more of a worldview there's a formula going on here.
Right.
The variables might be different.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, to come back to Pathless Path, he is, I think both of us resonated. We're like, all right, ding, ding, scoring points with us in terms of...
Yeah, we still have part 2 to watch also.
Yeah, and scoring points in terms of when you talk, and like, there's a lot of nodding going in on this side of the street.
A lot of nodding, a lot of writing down, yeah.
Because, well, I mean, the fallacy is what happens when you cover up one eye. Where you lose
a dimension
of reality. No more 3D, it's just all like a
flat
2D.
Yeah.
So you're missing out on something, and that's what I think he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a common sense kind of, well, let me use more perspectives. I see the picture
deeper. You see deeper,
better,
reality.
More complex.
So, okay, this question of consciousness again. Immediately, when I think of science, I think of they ask how questions, and they usually find answers to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because a how question is you're asking, how does this thing occur mechanically? Like, what are the pieces that come together to produce this thing? And what are the laws that guide their interaction with one another? And you can do that empirically, so it's easy to collect data and knowledge when you ask a how question.
Yep.
And to construct technologies with it. But then, when we take the opposite perspective of, say, the Mysterians, they want to ask why consciousness exists, and you can't really provide a scientific answer for that. But you can provide...
Why is a more first-person, subjective part of the street.
So in order to have an answer to a why question, you have to actually participate in producing the answer.
That's right.
It's not something out there that you can just provide independent of your subjective experience of it.
Yeah, and the second you try to go out the door, you kind of fall back into the subject. You're trying to objectify it, but you can't. You can't get away from it.
Right. So we've got these two poles of reality, the experiential and the material, the outside and the inside.
That's right.
And these two perspectives are stuck at a fork in the road trying to figure out which one they have to choose.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's either all experience, all consciousness, or it's all matter.
Yeah.
But do we have to pick one?
Well, I think we can walk with both of them. And there's a reason you have two eyes. You know, maybe just extended metaphorically, you're now being with
the mind. The mind would be the third eye, right?
Yes.
So when you see, in instead of just
and it's in the middle between. It's talking about the bridge.
Right.
Well, there's a reason it's in the middle, kind of thing.
I think I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and maybe it won't make sense because there's not much context, but hopefully you'll get something. The sense that time is a subjective experience, and space is something more objective that you can. I mean, space is the very possibility for distance between yourself and an object.
Yeah.
Whereas time is more of a mental thing, or mental. It's not a thing anymore.
It's
a
linear.
process. It's linear. Time. Well, it's. But see, that's spatializing.
Because you need past and future.
Right.
I think space would add another dimension to it, and therefore
Three dimensions.
Yeah. Because then you'd have this more inclusive.
Maybe time is zero dimensional though, and space arises out of it as like the next mutation.
Yeah. I mean, I can see how that could work too.
I mean, do you think time is more fundamental than space, or space more fundamental than time?
I don't like that question in sense of.
That's another.
In sense of do you think it's this or that? Well, I think kind of both.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't like it. And when you start feeling that way, well, then you walk with paradoxes now, and you're kind of more comfortable and at ease with understanding.
Right.
Oh,
you don't expect to actually have the opportunity to decide which one it is for once and for all.
The word, I think, is you don't reduce anymore. You include. You're seeing more perspectives on the issue. And what do we think about people that can use both eyes?
So you're expanding instead of reducing.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm gonna start using that.
All right. Well, that was a little tangent, but hopefully you enjoyed the non-tangential aspect of this reply to the pathless path. So I think I want to watch part 2. So
Good job, buddy.